4 bikers just kidnapped my wife? I'm standing here, staring at blank security footage. Coffee mug shattered across the kitchen floor, and my entire world collapsed in under 30 seconds. And guess what? The president is behind this. Oh. Over a stupid fence dispute, Catherine thinks she's messing with some soft suburban dad who'll fold under pressure. But here's the truth she doesn't know: before this quiet life I had a past. A set of skills that turned people like her into cautionary tales. Those wannabe thugs? They just unleashed something way beyond their league. My hands have stopped shaking. Comment below where you're watching from, because this is about to get biblical. And don't forget to subscribe if you love seeing HOA Karens get what they deserve. Let me back up. I honestly thought I'd left the chaos behind when Olivia and I moved into Maplewood Estates. 20 years running Delta Force operations, Afghanistan. Mountains, black sites, missions I can't even mention. After that, all I wanted was peace, tomatoes in the backyard, a cold beer by the grill, normalcy. Olivia, God bless her heart, understood that. She's an elementary school teacher, the kind who finds good in everyone, even a battle-scarred soldier like me. When we found this house with the perfect garden spot, I thought maybe I could finally breathe again. Stop scanning rooms for threats. Stop calculating exit routes. But as life likes to remind us, the best laid plans, they burn fast. Enter Catherine Baker, the HOA president from hell, who decided my 8-foot privacy fence broke the sacred 6-foot rule. Now, I'm reasonable, too. Decades in the military taught me when to pick fights. So I did the neighborly thing. Sent a polite email, pointed out that half the neighborhood's fences were over the limit, asked for a meeting to find a compromise. Respectful, professional, by the book, her response. A $500 fine and a threat of escalating penalties unless I caved. That's when I realized this wasn't some petty HOA gripe. This was personal. And Catherine? She wasn't just your everyday neighborhood Karen, though. She had the full starter pack. Every morning, 6 a.m. sharp, there she was. Front yard, tiny ruler in hand, measuring my fence like she was prepping for a NASA launch. Picture it, a 55-year-old in a power suit, crawling through my grass at dawn, obsessively logging measurements like it's her life's mission. Neighbors watched from behind curtains while their so-called community leader made a fool of herself. Honestly, it was equal parts hilarious and horrifying. One morning, as Catherine was doing her ritualistic crawl, Lavra Hall 15-year resident, retired teacher, pulled me aside. And that's when I learned just how deep this rabbit hole went. Stick with me, because what happened next, you'll never see coming. And if you think Catherine's out of line so far, hit that like button and tell me in the comments what you'd do in my shoes. Andrew, I've never seen her go this nuts over anyone else's violations, Lavra said, shaking her head as we both watched Catherine snapping photos of my fence from every possible angle. It's like she's got a personal grudge against you. Look at her, she's been out there almost an hour with that stupid ruler. Who does that? Normal people don't lose their minds over fence measurements. Looking back now, Lavra was dead on. But at that moment, I just figured we were dealing with an overzealous HOA president who'd binged too many reality shows about suburban drama. Quick question: have you ever had a neighbor who just felt off? Always watching a little too closely? Asking weirdly specific questions? Showing up at random times with flimsy excuses? Drop your answer in the comments, because that was Catherine from day one. And if this story's got you hooked so far, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Back then, I chalked it up to harmless nosiness, not reconnaissance. 20 years of combat experience, and I completely missed the warning signs because I wanted so badly to believe civilian life could be boring and normal. The real fireworks started at the community meeting. And folks, this is where the whole situation went off the rails. Catherine showed up with a full-blown PowerPoint presentation titled Neighborhood Standards Violations. I'm talking professionally designed slides, detailed photos like something out of a courtroom drama. And get this, she had pictures of me carrying groceries for our elderly neighbor labeled as unauthorized solicitation. A shot of me washing my car flagged as excessive water waste. Even an image of me signing for an Amazon package marked as commercial delivery disruption. I sat there thinking, did this woman really just turn everyday life into a criminal act? The entire room went silent, neighbors trading those awkward glances. You see when someone's clearly having a very public meltdown. But here's the thing. 2 decades of military life teach you one key principle: always have a backup plan. So I smiled, opened my laptop, and revealed my own little surprise. A slideshow titled HOA Compliance Audit, built with help from my old Delta Force brother, Alex Morrison, who, as fate would have it, lives right here in Maplewood Estates, and now works as a private investigator. Alex and I spent days documenting every single fence violation in this so-called pristine neighborhood. And when I started clicking through those slides, the energy in that room flipped instantly. Catherine's own fence, 8.2 feet. The HOA board president's, 7.8, and Catherine's best friend? She had an 8.5-foot decorative nightmare complete, with spike tops that could probably qualify as medieval weapons. My final slide was the knockout punch, a running tally of fines based on Catherine's own enforcement logic. Total, $73,000 owed by current board members. You should have seen her face when that number hit the screen. Pure, unfiltered fury simmering under that fake community leader smile. Her voice cracked as she stammered, "Those are different circumstances." While her laser pointer shook like a leaf in a hurricane, her polished act was unraveling in real time, and everyone in that room could see it. That's when Lavra Hall, God bless her, spoke up loud enough for the entire HOA to hear. "Different how?" "The bylaws don't say except for board members." Catherine froze. Papers flew as she scrambled to regain control, fully aware she'd just broadcast her hypocrisy to 40 neighbors, all of them recording. With smartphones. But here's the thing, it wasn't her double standards that really bothered me. It was the way she kept looking at me during that entire meeting, like she knew something I didn't, like this fence drama was just the first chess move in a much bigger game. Normal, HOA presidents, when caught red-handed, do what you'd expect: stammer. Excuses, try to smooth things over, save face. But Catherine? She didn't back down. She stared me down with this cold, calculating glare that set every combat instinct in my body screaming. This wasn't about fences. It wasn't about community rules. This was personal and on a level I couldn't yet understand. After the meeting, Alex intercepted me in the parking lot, cigarette already lit, his hand steady in that way only years of military discipline can teach. "Man," he said, smoke curling around his words, eyes scanning the dispersing crowd. "Something about this Catherine lady is off. I've been digging into her finances. She's living way beyond what an HOA president's stipend can cover. We're talking luxury car, designer outfits, that house she snagged last year. Either she's sitting on old money or she's pulling cash from places that don't show up in public records." Alex had always been the bloodhound, the guy who saw patterns no one else could. If he was worried, I knew I needed to be too. That night, I couldn't shake the unease. Every instinct told me something was fundamentally wrong here. I was doing my third lock check. Old habits die hard when unlocked doors once meant death sentences. When I saw her, Catherine, standing across the street at 2 a.m., not hiding, not pretending to walk a dog, just standing there in plain sight, staring straight at our bedroom window, and when our eyes met through the curtain, she didn't flinch. She didn't act embarrassed. She smiled, not a friendly smile. A slow, deliberate, "I know something you on," single quotes, T kind of smile that sent adrenaline roaring through my veins. Then, as calmly as if she'd just finished a nightly stroll, she turned and walked away like her mission was complete, leaving me there, frozen, staring out the glass, asking myself what kind of twisted HOA hellscape we'd moved into. Question: for you, why would an HOA president be outside your home at 2 a.m.? And what would you do if they smiled at you like that? Drop your answer in the comments. And hit subscribe, because this story is about to get darker. The next morning, I tried to write it off. Maybe it was intimidation, a power play, just Catherine being Catherine. I was brewing coffee, clinging to that thought, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. Marcus always said you'd bring trouble wherever you went. Some lessons need to be taught twice. And that, my friends, is when everything changed. My hand froze on the coffee mug. Marcus, Colonel Marcus Baker, my old commanding officer. The man whose illegal orders I refused to carry out, the decision that destroyed my career but saved my conscience. But here's the nightmare question. How does an anonymous number know about a classified court-martial from 15 years ago? The mug slipped from my grip and shattered on the kitchen tile, but I barely registered the sound. Instinct took over combat reflexes I thought I'd buried. Scan for threats, identify exits. Secure the perimeter. Olivia came running down the stairs. Panic etched across her face. One look at me and she knew we weren't dealing with a petty a feud anymore. Andrew, what happened? She asked, but I was already in motion, checking windows, locking every door, activating a security system I'd prayed I'd never need. 20 years of peace just evaporated in a single text message, the one that tied my quiet suburban life to ghosts from my classified military past. And that's when Catherine made her move. Her real move. She'd hired muscle, the kind of muscle that thought intimidation could solve everything. The Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club. 4 guys with rap sheets longer than their resumes, specializing in extortion, intimidation, and the kind of debt collection you don't walk away from, leading the pack. Derek Razor Hayes, ex-Army infantry, dishonorably discharged for insubordination, a guy who believed barking orders and swinging fists made him king of the streets. Then there was Tony Tank Parker, former bouncer, zero impulse control, a walking anger management case. Rico Bones, Valdez talent for making people deeply uncomfortable without saying a word. And Jake Diesel Williams, the cleanup guy. If you disappeared, chances are Diesel had something to do with it. Problem was, these clowns had no idea they were about to tangle with someone whose resin made their war stories look like campfire fairy tales. Derek's intel on me? Laughable. He spent hours scrolling my fitness website, reading testimonials from soccer moms, watching YouTube clips, even Googling phrases like how to intimidate personal trainers. No joke, he binge-watched Rocky movies for strategy. Meanwhile, my actual records, buried so deep in classified archives, he wouldn't even know what acronyms to type. Just some CrossFit poser, Derek told his crew. Teaches housewives to deadlift. 4 of us can crush this guy in a day. If Derek had spent 30 seconds in a military database instead of scrolling through gym selfies, this story wouldn't even exist. The Wolves' intimidation campaign started small and then escalated by the book. Day 1. Derek rolled past our house slow, revving his Harley like a mechanical predator marking territory. Day 2. Derek and Tony parked across the street like vultures, binoculars in hand, casually polishing chains and knives like it was some twisted performance art. Day 3. The full crew made their debut, 4 bikes circling my house in perfect formation, engines roaring loud enough to rattle windows and wake half the neighborhood. Lavra Hall called the cops, reporting motorcycle gang activity. Day 4. They cranked the intimidation dial to 11. 4 Harleys lined up across the street, engines idling in unison. Leather vests proudly flashing Iron Wolves patches, bandanas, mirrored sunglasses, the full Sons of Anarchy cosplay package. Every move choreographed for maximum fear factor. Theatrics designed to make your average suburban family lose sleep. Then came day 5 and the phone call that changed the game. Nice family you got there? Trainer, the voice rasped. It had that fake mobster confidence you hear from guys who binge too many gangster movies. 4 of us think accidents happen to people who don't respect community standards. I almost laughed, because here's the thing. There's a massive difference between real threats and street theater and these clowns. They were putting on a show for a man who spent 20 years dealing with people who kill without leaving evidence, but then they crossed the line. They threatened Olivia. And that changed everything. Mess with me? Fine. But the second you bring my wife into it, the suburban dad mask comes off and the operator underneath wakes up. Meanwhile, Lavra Hall was organizing emergency neighborhood Watch meetings, convinced a biker gang was casing every house on the block. The cops? Predictable response. They're on a public street, not breaking laws. We'll increase patrols. Translation: you're on your own until someone ends up in a hospital. I tried doing it the normal way, filed a report. Got a case number, heard nothing. Talked to a lawyer, he wanted $5,000 just to start a harassment case that would drag on for months and end in a flimsy restraining order. No one would enforce. The system wasn't built for people under immediate threat. It was built for paperwork, and that's when Derek and Tony decided to get cinematic, too. Harleys pulled up in front of my house at exactly 2 p.m. prime time for maximum audience. Engines cut, slow dismount, leather catching the sunlight. Like they were starring in their own low-budget action flick. Andrew Robinson. Derek bellowed loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. We need to have a conversation about your compliance issues. I stepped out onto the porch in full suburban dad camouflage, khakis, polo, reading glasses dangling from a chain. Perfect disguise for what I really was. Derek sized me up like I was livestock at a county fair, seeing exactly what he expected, a middle-aged guy past his prime. What Derek didn't know, he just declared war on the wrong guy. Typical desk jockey, Derek muttered to Tony, loud enough for me to hear. Guy probably hasn't thrown a punch since high school. 5 minutes, tops. What he didn't notice was the shift, the subtle repositioning of my feet, my weight distribution, my eyes already scanning and mapping. Knife on Derek's right hip, Tony's dominant hand. Improvised weapons in reach. Multiple exits if this turned ugly. 20 years of tactical training don't evaporate just because you put on khakis and a polo. We represent certain business interests regarding your neighborhood compliance issues, Derek said, voice dripping with fake menace. Oh yeah, I asked, tone calm, almost curious. Which business interests are those? That question hit him harder than a sucker punch. His face flushed crimson, clearly not used to targets who talk back instead of folding under pressure. The kind that don't like smart-ass questions. He snapped. I smiled. Time to have a little fun with Mr. Infantry. So, Derek, I said casually, throwing in a term only someone who's actually seen combat would understand. You prefer your fire teams staggered or linear? The color drained from his face as the realization crept in. I wasn't some civilian clueless about military jargon. I knew exactly what I was talking about. Look, just fix the fence and we'll forget this happened, he said finally, his bravado slipping as he started backing toward his bike. And if I don't? I asked, grin widening just enough for him to see I wasn't bluffing. Derek hesitated. Then came the line he probably thought sounded cinematic. Let's just say, your family might need better security. That was it. The suburban dad act. Died right there on the front lawn, and in its place? The operator, the one they never saw coming. Derek had just enrolled in a crash course called The Difference Between Street Theater and Actual Warfare. As their engines roared back to life and they peeled out, Alex appeared at my shoulder, wearing that look I'd seen in briefing rooms before. Missions that didn't officially exist. Andrew, he said quietly, you need to see what I found on Catherine. Turns out our sweet little HOA president wasn't just playing neighborhood dictator. Alex had dug deep, and what he uncovered made everything click. Catherine Baker was sitting at the center of a full-scale financial scam, luxury cars, designer labels, that shiny new house. Either she was sitting on a trust fund or she had revenue. Streams so far off the books, they might as well have been buried in a black site. Alex was always the sharp one, the guy who could see patterns the rest of us missed. If something had him on edge, I knew it wasn't nothing. Marcus, I asked myself, replaying the call in my head. How does some anonymous caller know about Colonel Marcus Baker? And what lessons are they talking about? Alex Morrison. Wasn't just smart, he was the guy Delta recruited for intel ops, while the rest of us were busy blowing doors and kicking in compounds. So when he called me 3 days after Derek's sad excuse for an intimidation stunt, his voice had that tone I'd only ever heard in briefing rooms before black ops missions. Andrew, he said flatly, you need to see what I found on your HOA president. Turns out Catherine Baker wasn't just drunk on power in a suburban fiefdom. She was running a full-blown real estate manipulation racket that would make the mob jealous. Alex had traced it all shell companies with names like Suburban Development LLC, Neighborhood Investment Group, and Community Enhancement Partners. These weren't random businesses. They were tentacles in a network buying up homes for pennies on the dollar. The scheme was brutally simple. Catherine would identify families and prime properties, then unleash harassment hell through HOA rules. And her friends in city offices. We're talking bogus foundation violations, phantom electrical issues, fabricated environmental hazards, each one carrying a 5-figure, fix it or else, price tag, and her cousin Deborah in the permits department. Yeah, she was greasing the wheels. Once the stress and bills broke people like clockwork, a mystery buyer would swoop in at sheriff sales offering 40 to 60% of the home's market value. The result? 47 families uprooted in 4 years. Over $8.2 million skimmed through systematic fraud, all dressed up as community improvement. Then Lavra Hall dropped a bomb over coffee that made it personal. She tried to buy my corner lot last year. Lavra said, voice trembling. When I refused? Suddenly I had a $12,000 foundation violation out of nowhere. My husband nearly had a heart attack from the stress. I remember sitting there, gripping that coffee mug so hard my knuckles went white. We ended up in the Weiss during that nightmare. And every time I sat in those sterile waiting rooms, one thought kept echoing in my head. How does one woman have this much power to wreck families over property lines? Once Lavra opened up, the floodgates burst. Neighbor after neighbor shared horror stories. Bogus violations, crippling repair bills, and those mystery cash offers that somehow showed up when people were at their financial breaking point. But then came the detail that chilled me to my core. Andrew, Lavra said softly, she knew you were Delta Force before anyone else did. I froze. How the hell would an HOA president know something buried under layers of classification? Normal people don't dig through Pentagon archives for fun. Which meant this wasn't random suburban drama anymore. This was targeted. Then Derek made his first major screw-up. He called me directly. Lady wants a meeting tomorrow, he said, voice trying for casual and missing by a mile. Says you'll understand when she mentions Baker. I nearly dropped the phone. Colonel Marcus Baker, my former commanding officer. The man who gave me the illegal order that ended my military career, the one I refused to carry out. The order that led to a court-martial so classified. Most generals couldn't access it without clearance. So how in the hell did some HOA president and her biker sidekicks know that name? The puzzle pieces slammed together in my head like a bad dream. Catherine's obsession with me wasn't about fences or paint colors. Her designer wardrobe didn't match her volunteer gig. She had a real estate scam worth millions. And now she was digging into buried Pentagon secrets, which left me with one terrifying truth. This wasn't about property lines anymore. It was about leverage. This wasn't some HOA busybody obsessing over fence heights. This was calculated, organized, and deeply personal, and my instincts were screaming louder than they had in a war zone. So I treated it like what it was turning into, a mission. Hidden cameras covered every angle of the property. GPS trackers went on Olivia's car. I inventoried the weapons and cash I swore I'd never touch again. Escape routes, memorized, neighbors, quietly briefed on what to do if, without telling them why. Olivia saw it happening. The switch. Not PTSD, not a flashback. This was something else, the operator inside me taking control because someone had crossed the line. They didn't just target me, they threatened the one person I can't lose. Alex was right there with me, helping turn a neighborhood into a battle plan. Lavra Hall stepped up as our intel coordinator, logging every Catherine encounter and rallying neighbors to share their horror stories. Ring doorbells became surveillance nodes. WhatsApp chats turned into encrypted comms. What started as a neighborhood gripe group had morphed into a full-on counterintelligence network. Meanwhile, Catherine's biker enforcers were cracking under pressure. Rico grumbled to Tony that this guy isn't folding like the others. Jake thought it was time to make it personal. Big mistake. I was already inside their comms, tracking every desperate move. Would it hold up in court? Not a chance. Did I care? Not even slightly. Because here's the thing. 20 years in Delta Force leaves you with a skill set, and these guys? They weren't prepared for someone who spent decades hunting targets far more lethal than a bunch of weekend warriors in leather jackets, and Catherine? She was unraveling. Her mortgage deadline loomed. The intimidation tactics were backfiring. Neighbors were whispering questions she couldn't afford to answer, and then she made the one move that crossed a line so hard. There was no going back. She was spiraling. The empire she'd built on intimidation and fraud was crumbling, and when people like Catherine lose control, they get dangerous. That phone call Derek made to arrange the meeting, that wasn't just another power play. That was her last desperate move to save a 15-year plan that was collapsing because she miscalculated one thing. The soft approach isn't working. Catherine snapped during their final sit-down, her perfect community leader mask slipping to reveal something raw and venomous underneath. I need results in 48 hours. Take his wife somewhere he can't find her until he signs those papers. For the first time, Derek hesitated. His voice wavered. Lady, this is heavy. You sure about this? Her expression froze like carved stone. Derek, do you know what happens to soldiers who refuse direct orders? My ex-husband taught me one thing: some people only understand force. When he left, Catherine opened her desk drawer and pulled out a worn photograph. A younger Catherine in uniform standing beside an officer, and in the background a face that looked hauntingly familiar. She stared at it for a long time, fingers running along the edges, eyes burning with something darker than anger. This wasn't about money anymore. This was hatred sharpened over decades, whose face was in that photo. And why had she hidden it for all these years? Here's what you need to understand about me. You don't really retire from Delta Force. The reflexes, the threat assessments, the ability to end a problem before it ends you that doesn't vanish because you bought a lawnmower and started teaching housewives proper squats. So when Olivia's GPS pinged near the industrial district on a Tuesday evening and her phone went dead, I knew instantly. Derek's crew had crossed the line from wannabe thugs to federal-level kidnapping. And in that moment, Andrew the suburban dad died. Ghost of Kabul was back. And let me tell you, these clowns had no clue what kind of hell they just invited. Kidnapping itself? Laughable. Olivia was leaving a parent-teacher conference when Derek and Tony approached Harley's, parked like they were starring in a bad biker drama. Ma'am, we need a word about your husband's situation, Derek said, trying for calm authority, and landing somewhere between creepy and incompetent. Olivia reached for her car door. Tony stepped in, chest puffed like he'd been practicing this act in the mirror. Just a friendly conversation, lady. He said, the universal line of someone planning something that is anything but friendly. That's when Olivia reminded them exactly why I'd spent months drilling her on self-defense. She whipped out the pepper spray and nailed Tony square in the face from 3 feet out. He stumbled back, cursing and half-blind just as Olivia screamed, "Help! Kidnapping!" Loud enough to rattle the entire parking lot. Derek froze as phones started recording from every angle, realizing what should have been a quick intimidation stunt was now a full-blown federal offense caught on video. Tony, half-blind and enraged, lunged for Olivia and shoved her hard toward a waiting Van Rico had just pulled up. What started as a friendly conversation had spiraled into a kidnapping in broad daylight, and there was no walking this back. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed. With a GPS alert, Olivia's car was still parked at the school, but her phone? Racing across town toward the industrial sector. 3 calls. Straight to voicemail. 6 more. Same result. That's when 20 years of combat instinct slammed into gear. I swept through the house like I was back in Fallujah, pulling gear from a hidden cache in the garage. Night vision. Body armor. Comes. Combat knife. Hardware a suburban dad shouldn't own but a former Delta Force operator never really gives up. Alex pulled up as I was loading the truck. One look at my face and he knew. The of Rommel's over. This was a mission. Olivia's been taken, I said, my voice cold and steady. The kind of calm that only comes when training buries fear and you slide into pure operator mode. I'll call for backup. Get the cops. he started. No time. I cut him off and checked my rifle. If they hurt her. I didn't. Finish. I didn't need to. He saw my eyes and understood. Ghost of Kabul was in play. The warehouse district was exactly what you'd expect from idiots who think they're criminal masterminds. Abandoned buildings, shattered windows, broken lights, zero cameras. Perfect place to disappear someone. I launched a surveillance drone and swept the area. 1 warehouse, 2 stories. 3 vehicles parked outside. 4 heat signatures inside, 1 restrained, sitting in a chair. Derek and Tony flanking Olivia. Rico watching the door. Jake in the back, tinkering with a bike like this was some outlaw biker movie. This was the perfect setup for someone who knew what they were doing. Patience, planning, precision. That's what a professional approach demands. I killed power to the entire building, plunging them into complete darkness while my night vision lit up the room like daylight. The skylight entry. Rope work I hadn't used since Afghanistan. But muscle memory kicks in fast when your life once depended on it. Rico never heard a thing. I slipped in from his blind spot, hit him with a taser out cold before he hit the floor. Jake was next, too busy with engine noise to notice me until I had him in the sleeper hold. 8 seconds later, lights out. Tony heard the tools clatter and came creeping with a flashlight. Bad move. That glow made him a glowing bullseye in my goggles. I dropped behind him. Pressure point strike, silent takedown. 3 down. Now Derek was alone, spinning in circles, waving a flashlight like a camper lost in the woods. Olivia sat zip-tied, calm because she knew what was coming. His panic smelled like gasoline ready to ignite. Step away from my wife. My voice cut through the dark, calm, commanding. Who the hell are you? He barked, fumbling out a knife with trembling hands. Someone who spent 2 decades hunting men like you in places way deadlier than this. I replied, closing the distance with lethal precision. He lunged. Then that's when I showed him why Delta operators train in blade combat. 3 seconds. Disarmed, reversed, his own knife at his throat. Jesus! You're not just some trainer, Derek stammered, finally realizing he brought a biker gang to a special forces fight. How was I supposed to know? He babbled as Olivia sliced her zip ties with the emergency knife I'd made her carry. Catherine said you were a gym teacher. Never said you were military. That slip was everything I needed proof of Catherine Baker's involvement and legal grounds to burn her little empire to the ground. What exactly did she tell you to do? I pressed, the blade resting where he'd never forget it. Just scare you, make you sell, keep your wife a few hours. Nobody said anything about special forces. His voice cracked, panic flooding as the reality of federal kidnapping charges hit him like a freight train. By the time the cops stormed in, thanks to Alex tracking my phone, Derek was spilling secrets like his life depended on it. It was Catherine. She paid me. She's been running a property scam, displacing families. She set this whole thing up. As the FBI cuffed him and dragged him out, Derek twisted around and screamed one last thing, a revelation so explosive it froze the blood in my veins. She said you'd remember Afghanistan. Something about payback for destroying her husband's career. What happened out there? And who was Catherine's husband that you supposedly ruined? That question shattered the silence like a gunshot. You know that moment when 1,000 puzzle pieces finally click into place and you realize you've been staring at the wrong picture the entire time? That's exactly what hit me 3 days later when FBI agent Rogers slid Derek's full confession across his desk. She paid extra the second she learned his real name, Derek had told them. Andrew Robinson destroyed my husband's military career. Now I destroy his civilian life. My blood ran cold reading those words. Suddenly, everything Catherine had ever done, the harassment, the classified knowledge, the 15-year property scam, it all locked into a terrifying pattern. Alex's database search confirmed what I already feared. Catherine Baker wasn't just some real estate shark. She was Catherine Marcus, her maiden name, before a bitter divorce ripped away everything she had built her life around. Old military base photos sealed it. A younger Catherine beaming at social functions, standing proudly beside Colonel Marcus. Baker in full dress uniform, the perfect picture of military prestige, but the background details. Those dates matched my court-martial hearings. The locations lined up with classified proceedings. And then it hit me. She had been planning this for 15 years. This wasn't some HOA power play or greedy property grab. This was a long-con revenge methodical takedown of my entire civilian existence, mirroring the way my refusal to follow illegal orders had obliterated her husband's career. Catherine had spent over a decade shadowing military veterans, waiting for me to let my guard down, waiting for the day I became just another homeowner vulnerable to HOA rules. She built the finances, the criminal network, everything needed to crush me completely. Agent Rogers spread the evidence like a war map on his desk, emails, bank transfers, and then the spreadsheets, acquisition targets. My address at the top, labeled in bold, Priority Alpha, Marcus Revenge plus $580,000 flip potential. But Catherine's scheme went far beyond a personal vendetta. She'd been orchestrating similar harassment campaigns across 5 states, targeting military families who had done the same thing. I did refuse unlawful orders and pay the price for integrity. 47 families displaced. $8.2 million in fraudulent acquisitions, all bankrolled by a woman whose hatred metastasized into a full-blown criminal empire. The deeper truth hit like a gut punch. Every foreclosure, every ruined life, every property flip was rehearsal for the ultimate act destroying me. Catherine had spent over a decade mining veteran databases and VA records, waiting for one name to surface: Andrew Robinson, a civilian homeowner vulnerable to authority. She didn't just build a scam. She built an entire war chest to finance her revenge op against me. When the FBI stormed the next HOA meeting, Catherine's polished mask shattered. They dragged her out in cuffs, and the entire neighborhood watched as their community leader exploded into a full-blown meltdown. "You destroyed my husband's career," she screamed, her voice raw with 2 decades of hate. 20 years of marriage gone because you couldn't follow simple orders. I had to rebuild my life from nothing. Her composure collapsed completely, ranting about military honor and classified missions in front of shocked neighbors. "Your precious morals cost me everything. So I made 47 families pay the price for your righteousness." That's when the real horror landed. Marcus Baker's illegal order to hit civilian infrastructure in Afghanistan wasn't just an abstract ethics debate, it was a war crime that could have sparked international scandal. My refusal didn't ruin Marcus by accident. It forced the Pentagon to admit corruption in its own ranks. Catherine's crusade wasn't about losing social status. It was punishment for me and for anyone who'd stood against military abuse of power. The FBI's evidence sealed it: spreadsheets, bank transfers, victim lists. Catherine had been systematically hunting veterans tied to ethics violations, weaponizing property law to dismantle their civilian lives, just like she tried to do to mine. And that's when I realized this war wasn't over. It had just changed battlefields. She'd tried to have my house condemned months before I ever met her, bribing building inspectors to create those mystery structural citations I'd shrugged off as random. None of it was random. Every move had been part of a calculated campaign that started long before we joined the neighborhood. Catherine didn't just become HOA president by chance. She bought that house and clawed her way into power for one reason: to destroy me. Derek's jailhouse confession gave prosecutors the last pieces of the puzzle. "She had files on you," he told them. "Deployment history, psychological profile, family routines, daily schedules, everything." This wasn't harassment. This was a civilian assassination plan. Catherine spent more time and resources plotting my downfall than most insurgents dedicate to real-world targets. All because 15 years ago I refused to follow illegal orders. Orders that would have made me complicit in war crimes. When her attorney dropped the case evidence overwhelming, client unstable, RICO charges impossible to fight, Catherine snapped completely. 15 years. She screamed as agents dragged her away. 15 years waiting for you to be happy enough to lose everything. Do you even know what it's like watching your life burn because some self-righteous soldier thinks he knows better than his commander? The hatred in her voice was chilling. But what gutted me most was realizing Catherine had spent more time planning my destruction than I'd spent building my second chance at life. The neighborhood's reaction. Exactly what you'd expect when they learned their HOA president had been running an organized crime syndicate from the community center. Families she'd ruined came to watch her arrest, sharing stories of foreclosure, forced relocation, and dreams stolen, all by a woman they once trusted to protect property values. Lavra Hall stood up at that final meeting and said what everyone else was thinking: how many more families would she have destroyed if Andrew hadn't been the wrong guy to mess with? And just when I thought I understood the full nightmare, Agent Rogers dropped a bombshell in his final briefing. "We've traced her network to 12 other military communities across the country," Rogers said. "Same pattern harassment, aimed at veterans tied to ethics violations or whistleblower cases. We need your help with Operation Clean Sweep to identify targets and dismantle this system before more lives are destroyed." I glanced at Olivia. She gave me a firm nod. Knowing this mission could give my civilian life the sense of purpose I'd lost since leaving the service. As I combed through the final FBI reports, preparing to accept Rogers's offer, Alex stormed into the house, laptop in hand, face pale. "Andrew, you need to see this." His fingers flew across the keyboard. Catherine wasn't working alone. She had a partner. Someone's been feeding her intel for years. Encrypted messages, the code name, Patriot 6, and whoever this is, they had access to military databases even Catherine couldn't touch. Wait, Catherine had a partner this entire time? Who the hell was Patriot 6? The truth hit like a gut punch. My personal nightmare wasn't an isolated vendetta, it was the tip of a national conspiracy. Alex pulled up the logs. 7 years of encrypted communication between Catherine and Patriot 6. Passing along classified data, veteran addresses, psychological profiles, service records. This wasn't about a bitter ex-wife seeking payback. This was systematic retaliation against soldiers who chose integrity over blind obedience, run by someone with Pentagon-level clearance and the bankroll to fund multiple criminal cells. The scope was staggering: military contractor databases, VA psych evaluations, financial records from credit unions, dependent family data, all in the hands of a shadow operator working under the radar. Patriot 6 wasn't helping Catherine out of personal loyalty. This was an organized network targeting whistleblowers, ethics officers, and anyone who'd refused illegal orders. Catherine's scheme? Just one tentacle of something far bigger, a covert system to destroy veterans for exposing corruption. We weren't dealing with suburban HOA drama anymore. This was domestic terrorism hiding behind property disputes, and Rogers's invitation to join Operation Clean Sweep, it wasn't just a courtesy. It was a battle line. It wasn't just about filling a role. It was recognition that someone with my background could spot patterns others would miss. We need someone who understands the military mindset and the civilian vulnerabilities these predators exploit, Rogers said during our briefing at the federal building downtown. You've lived through their methods, survived their operation, and still have the tactical instincts to dismantle this network. This was the kind of mission that gave my civilian life the sense of purpose I'd been missing since hanging up the uniform. But before joining Clean Sweep, we had one more objective: to follow every trace of Catherine's local operation. I treated the process like a military campaign, because that's exactly what it was. Psychological strategies to help victims reclaim their lives. Intelligence collection to fortify federal indictments. Tactical plans to shield witnesses from retaliation. Lavra Hall spearheaded victim statements for the grand jury. Alex dissected financial records to expose money laundering through A accounts, and I briefed FBI teams on Catherine's psychological weaknesses, using 2 decades of experience analyzing enemy commanders in war zones. The takedown was flawless. Catherine's cousin Deborah, the building permits insider, earned 3 years in federal prison and a permanent government employment ban. The shell corporations? Seized. $8.2 million recovered for the Victim Compensation Fund. HOA board members who looked the other way? Stripped of power and branded with ethics violations that would haunt them forever. As for Derek and his Iron Wolves crew, They got federal kidnapping conviction sentences between 8 and 12 years each. Let that be a warning to anyone dumb enough to take contracts from a suburban HOA president with a vendetta. And then came Catherine's sentencing, a public implosion that revealed just how far gone she really was. She glared at me across the courtroom, voice shaking with rage. "You cost me everything!" She screamed as her attorney tried in vain to restrain her. 20 years of marriage, my home, my status, my entire life. Marcus was right about you. You're a dangerous loose cannon who ruins everything you touch. The judge had to pound the gavel as she spiraled into a tirade about military honor and classified missions, spitting out details that should have been sealed in federal archives. But what froze the entire room was her last line, delivered like a confession and a death sentence rolled into one. "I spent every single day for 15 years planning your destruction." She locked eyes with me, voice dripping with venom. "Every single morning I woke up plotting ways to take away everything you loved, just like you took everything from me." 47 families suffered because Andrew Robinson thought he knew better than his commanding officers. And I would have destroyed 47 more if that's what it took to make you feel what I felt. The question hit me like a sniper shot. How many more veterans were on this hit list? And if I was just the beginning, what was their endgame? 6 months later, I stood in my backyard, smoke from barbecue grills rising as 47 families celebrated the successful conclusion of Operation Clean Sweep, the most meaningful mission of my life. The national investigation had exposed a military contractor, Patriot Defense Solutions, as the source of the chaos. Its CEO had been orchestrating harassment campaigns against veterans who dared expose his fraudulent Pentagon contracts, 7 years of domestic terrorism, all disguised as petty property disputes. Hundreds of families across 12 states ambushed by an enemy hiding in plain sight. His punishment? 25 years in federal prison on domestic terrorism charges. The company? Dissolved, assets seized, millions allocated to victim compensation. 3 other key conspirators received sentences of 10 to 15 years, but this wasn't just about taking them down. We built something bigger: protocols to protect whistleblowers, compensation funds for families, and intelligence systems designed to detect and neutralize future threats before they strike. The personal victory, though, watching our shattered neighborhood transform into a true community. Lavra Hall, once a victim, was now HOA president, running on transparency and service. Term limits, financial oversight rules that made another Catherine Baker impossible. Alex Morrison took over as treasurer, his forensic accounting skills ensuring community funds would never bankroll revenge again. And the fence, the one that started this entire nightmare, now stands at exactly 9 feet. Olivia's organic garden blooms behind decorative panels that neighbors admire every day. Kids stop by after school to learn about sustainable gardening. People share vegetables, recipes, and stories instead of lawsuits and threats. From a battlefield of fear to a home filled with hope, what once stood as a symbol of HOA tyranny is now the heart of our neighborhood gathering spot for block parties and community projects. The new HOA board even approved it unanimously as an enhancement that raises property values. Every time I think about Catherine's obsession with code violations, I can't help but smile. The personal healing I've experienced, unexpected but powerful. 2 decades of battling PTSD have eased, thanks to a mission that blended protecting my family with serving my community and helping other veterans under threat. Neighbors regularly ask me for security consultations and self-defense classes, giving me a civilian mission that channels my military training toward protection instead of destruction. And Olivia, we've never been stronger. She saw the lengths I'd go to keep her safe under extreme pressure, while I learned to trust community support systems. Something military life never taught me: that backyard celebration wasn't just a party. It was everything I'd hoped civilian life could be, but never believed possible. Former victims of Catherine's scams laughing together. Kids playing tag while parents swap gardening tips and renovation ideas. People who barely spoke before the chaos now plan neighborhood projects and show up for each other through life's everyday challenges. If you believe communities should unite instead of divide, hit that like button right now. The recognition from law enforcement and veteran organizations was nice, but what really mattered was the plaque Lavra Hall gave me at the HOA meeting. Community defender? Some heroes don't wear uniforms, they wear cargo shorts and protect neighborhoods. My acceptance speech was short because actions matter more than words, but I made one point clear. I spent 20 years fighting overseas to protect American families. Turns out the most important battle was right here, protecting neighbors from predators exploiting the very systems meant to serve us. That message spread through veteran networks and local forums, opening doors I never saw coming, consulting for communities battling HOA corruption, speaking engagements about stopping systematic harassment, and advisory roles with veteran organizations, building whistleblower protection protocols. My civilian career now has a mission that ties directly to my years in uniform, something I never thought possible, but the most poetic moment of justice? That came last month when new neighbors moved. At our monthly community barbecue, a young couple nervously approached me. The husband stammered, "We heard there are some rules about fence heights. Just wanted to make sure we're following them." 200 people went dead silent, all eyes on me. His face drained white, and his wife gripped his arm like they were ready to run for the car. Then Lavra Hall burst into laughter. Alex followed. Within seconds, the whole crowd was clapping and cheering. I grinned at the nervous couple and said, "Talk to our HOA president about what kind of fence works best for you. Around here, we believe improvements should bring people together, not divide them." The relief on their faces? Absolutely priceless. The entire neighborhood welcomed them with the kind of warmth that makes suburbia worth living in. Later that evening, while Olivia stacked plates and I folded tables, she smirked. "So much for quiet suburban life. Any regrets?" I looked around. The fence that started everything, the garden that became a gathering place, the neighbors who'd gone from strangers to family. "Sometimes," I said, "you have to fight for peace, but now we've earned it." Here's the twist that still blows my mind. Agent Rogers told me during our final debrief that Catherine's revenge scheme cost her everything: money, status, connections, even her freedom, and me. Her attempt to destroy my life gave me what 2 decades in uniform never did: a mission that matters in civilian life, a neighborhood that values strength and integrity, proof that sometimes the good guys actually win. The final image I'll leave you with: my garage, tactical gear hanging next to gardening tools and family bikes. A perfect balance between warrior and neighbor, a life I never believed possible until Catherine Baker's hatred forced me to find it. And here's the truth: sometimes the most dangerous person on your street is the suburban dad who just wants to grill burgers and grow tomatoes. And sometimes that's exactly who the neighborhood needs to stay safe from people who mistake kindness for weakness. If this suburban warfare story got your adrenaline pumping, smash that like button right now. Drop a comment. What would you have done in my shoes? And don't forget to subscribe, because next time, justice takes an even wilder turn.